Hello and welcome to the Winner's Circle. I'm your host, Dr. Sean Hubbard. As you're aware, on the Winner's Circle, we like to take on the challenges of the day. We like to talk about some of those that are personal, some interpersonal, and some that are societal. Of course, we're not just going to talk about challenges and problems. We like to focus on solutions, and especially those that are creative to help us win and ultimately experience victorious health. Here to help us do all that today is a friend and colleague, Dr. Adrienne Rigueur. Dr. Rigueur, welcome to the Winner's Circle.
Hi, Dr. Hubbard. How are you?
It's great. I'm glad to have you here. You know, before we get started, I have to acknowledge that I noticed that you recently won an award and you were recognized by the Burlington-Camden Alumni Association of Kappa Alpha Psi. Congratulations. They were recognizing women that are on the front lines and taking care of our community during this difficult time, this pandemic. And so congratulations. I'm really happy to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, I have to tell you, I'm aware that, we're both physicians, of course, and we have this responsibility of talking about the major issues, those being COVID and the pandemic. And I have to tell you, we're concerned about COVID and this virus and that it makes us sick. But I'm going to tell you, be frank with you, I'm already sick of COVID. I'm kind of over it in a way. I'm sort of tired of it. We've been in crisis mode for, looks like 10, 11 months. We've been asked to do all these things, and we're asking other people to do all these things. I'm over it and kind of sick, but at the same time, I'm aware that you're on the front line. I'm on the sort of semi-front line, but you're actually on the front line. And so I figured I need an attitude adjustment. And who better to do it than somebody who can't afford to have the attitude that some of us have who are not where you are. So that's why I wanted to have you on the show. I need an attitude adjustment.
Well, I understand your perspective. To be quite frank, us in the ER are tired of it too. But I think what's more tiring and upsetting and hard is that it's not looking good right now. And that we still have a long way to go.
Sure.
So we have to get our second wind and re-up our energy in order to get through this.
Sure. You're right. Practicing emergency medicine, I'm thinking that, is that what made you want to go into the field, being in crisis mode and having to deal with things like this? Is that what attracted you?
No, actually, I was supposed to be a pediatrician. So it wasn't until like the end of medical school where I did my emergency room rotation at an inner city hospital. And my attending, it was my first rotation of my last year, and my attending was like, this is what you're going to do. And I was like, I'm not quite sure. And I still had surgery and a couple other things to do. And my mom thought I was going to go into surgery.
Wow.
And then like by mid-year, I was like, no, he was right. This is what I'm going to do.
Wow.
It's just a variety. You can go from a small finger laceration to a stroke, to a heart attack, and back to a sprained knee. So it's a variety of things you see. Every day's different, and every patient's different and has different needs.
Oh, sure. I wanted to talk to you because you're practicing in the community here, and I know that you would give us the raw details and exactly how things are. I mean, you're from the local inner city community, you're a mom, and you're a frontline worker. I'm sure that you'll give it to us straight. So about COVID, let me ask you, how do you know at this point? I mean, we've learned a lot. Before we didn't even know exactly what patients would look like, how they would present. We thought that everybody would have a kind of emphysematous type of picture. It seemed like we were mostly looking at risk factors for chronic lung conditions. But at this time, how do you know when somebody, now that we're learning what we've learned, and you're learning from patient to patient now every day, faster than I am probably, how do you know when somebody has COVID, just from history and physical alone?
Most of it is from history. So a lot of times people will come in with vague symptoms, body aches, may not have a fever. That's not a definite thing to have. May have a cough, mostly dry, not necessarily like hacking up a lung kind of cough, but something that's annoying enough to make them notice it. And a lot of people are having GI symptoms. So between hearing that And then if we end up hearing the story about when it started and what they did those 7 to 14 days before the symptoms started, you can kind of paint a picture that this is most likely COVID.
I see. Okay, so a history of potential exposures, perhaps, and then what I'm hearing you say is they may have some generalized symptoms, maybe some diarrhea, perhaps you say fatigue, plus minus fever. Is that what it sounds like? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I'm not seeing that many fevers anymore, to be honest. When people come into the ER and we know they're sick, we see a fever. But it's not necessarily a thing you have to have.
Okay.
Shortness of breath is a scary feature you see. So once someone has gone from maybe just body aches, maybe low-grade fevers, maybe high fevers, and now they have a cough and shortness of breath, that's like the next frontier of COVID. And we know that that is a case that we have to look at a little bit more carefully to see what's going on.
Being on the front line, do you get a chance to see results come back often?
Yes. Not COVID necessarily that day. So what typically happens is someone will come in, if they're sick enough to get admitted, we'll test them again. So some people come in saying, I've already been tested, I know I have it, but our hospital policy is to retest to make sure if we don't have within 14 days the copy of the results. And then I will see like their chest x-ray, blood work, and then maybe 2 days later we'll see their COVID results.
Oh, I see. So does that mean that everybody for whom you're concerned of COVID, they get admitted?
Absolutely not. And that's a misnomer. A lot of people think, oh, I got COVID, I need to go to the hospital. And that's actually not the thing to do. The only people that really need to be in the hospital are the people who have shortness of breath and a low oxygen saturation. So that means we test with a finger probe how much oxygen your body has. And the number that's normal is between 95 to 100. But if you're under 92%, we are concerned. If you add to that a chest x-ray that's abnormal, showing perhaps a type of what we call COVID pneumonia signs, then we're definitely concerned. And those are the patients that get sick. Those are the patients that we keep. Those are the patients that need to be in the hospital. So low oxygen, shortness of breath, and then that's when you'll ask, well, what is your history? And you'll start to get to know more. Like some people have emphysema. So they're already starting with a low oxygen amount because of their lung disease. Some people have diabetes. Some people have high blood pressure. And some people are just overweight, which is all problems with COVID.
Right. Okay. You know, I'm listening to your answers here, and they certainly reflect that you're seeing patients on a regular basis, on day in and day out, and very current. Whereas some of what I have come across in the media, you can tell that they're studying and they're very learned about COVID patients. It's just a little bit different. I can tell that you have your hands on people.
I was just there yesterday working hard.
I bet. Now,
what I think a lot of people don't know, and what I'm seeing a lot right now, is people come in and they're like, well, I have body aches. It's been 6 days. What do I do? And the answer is there isn't a medication we can give you. There isn't anything really to be done. Tylenol and Motrin or ibuprofen are the answer. Some people get disappointed at that answer too, but it's just the truth. We're not going to give you the medicines the president died or any other person you heard on the news who got sick when you just have body aches and maybe a low-grade fever. The people that need to be in the hospital, that need those beds that we're running out of, are the people with that low oxygen.
Sure. Yes, you know, we have had a challenge with the communication and getting these ideas out. And, you know, a lot of people did not want to be obviously shut down and interrupt their activities. And I should say our activities. None of us want to interrupt our activities. But we had this challenge, this bottleneck, and we still have it really, with critical care beds and ventilators. So the big question is, who has to go on a ventilator? It sounds like you're in the position to make that decision a lot of times. When does somebody need to go on the ventilator?
So that's what's changed about COVID from the beginning to now. So back when it started, um, we tried to intubate or put people on a breathing machine right away because we thought that was the right thing to do, because they would come in with oxygen levels like 70 or 80, but they would be looking at us and not really looking in distress. But clearly, if I tell you 100, 95 to 100 is a good range, 70 to 80 was really scary for us. And we were scared for them. So we would put them on the ventilator, try and get that oxygen level up right away. But what we've learned is that's not helpful to do it so soon. So we use other oxygen giving methods, different types of tubing, different types of flow, which are high oxygen flow, without using a ventilator first. We really, really, really try to avoid putting them on the ventilator unless there is no choice. Things like they're not awake enough. They're getting tired because they're working so hard to breathe, or their mental status, like they're out of it. Those are times where we can't avoid it and we have to do it knowing that it's not the best things. But right now, what we try to do is use other methods of giving you oxygen without taking over completely.
I see.
With the ventilator.
I see. Okay, so I'm really learning from what you're saying and comparing it to what other contributors have said in your position. And it seems that COVID, pneumonia, and a lot of the breathing challenges that we get with COVID, that it really appears qualitatively different. I mean, the patients appear different, where they don't appear as, let's say, sick as they are. I've heard other people saying kind of what you're saying. You check their pulse ox, it's really alarmingly looking low sometimes when their lungs are affected, but they may not look so bad. Is that right?
Yes, so I've seen that a lot recently, and it kind of surprised me. So one gentleman I saw, he came in the front door, and the nurses called me immediately and said, "Meet me in bed 5. This is serious." And they told me over the phone his oxygen level when he walked in the front door was 64. And I was like, "He walked in the front door?" And they were like, "He walked in the front door. He didn't come in the back with an ambulance." And I ran to the room, as usual, got my gown on, got my headgear on, got my gloves, got my portable stethoscope, because you can't keep your same stethoscope for everyone, got all dressed up, met him in the room, and he was kind of just sitting there like, "Hey, doc, what's up?" "Yeah, I'm kind of short of breath, coughing a little bit." This has been going on for like a week. And I was like, he didn't have any trouble talking to me. It was all very bizarre. But then later on, you look at his chest x-ray, there's patchiness in it where oxygen exchange isn't going well. And his oxygen level, even while we were talking, went down even less, to like in the 50s, because he was using more oxygen to talk to me. At some point I said to him, "Stop talking. You're making me nervous." And he was like, "Why? What's going on?" I was like, "Just trust me on this one."
Wow.
And then we hooked him up to something called high flow oxygen. And he started to very slowly bump up, bump up, bump up. And by the time I got him to the ICU, he's about in the 80s.
Wow.
Which on a normal person, that is a time where we're putting them on a ventilator.
Sure.
But for our COVIDs, he was comfortable. He wasn't having like gasping for air, and we were making progress without having to put him on a ventilator.
Wow.
And a lot of times what I find is, in terms of some people come in and they're like gasping, and they're like their oxygen level is 99, and you just have to measure.
Sure.
And I guess that's what my job as an emergency room physician:
Sure.
sick and not sick.
Wow.
And then use those skills that we have to triage or move people in the hospital or send them home.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, because you're really giving us a slice of what it feels like from your position as somebody who's looking at patients on a regular basis. You know, I think that we'll take a break, but when we come back, I'm going to ask you the big question these days as regards to COVID. We'll take a break, and then we'll join you back for that. Okay? In a few minutes.
Sidewalks built for fun. Legendary rock and roll clubs.
This is how we do it. Hippity hop.
Casinos by the ocean.
Hippity hop.
Now that's New Jersey. 130 miles of beautiful beaches, solid rock, and everything in between.
Look in the window.
Now that's New Jersey. Plan your New Jersey trip at visitnj.org. Waves of fun. Nights of excitement. And a trail of memories. Now that's New Jersey.
Really? Hi, welcome back to the Winner's Circle. I'm your host, Dr. Sean Hubbard, and we're joined today by colleague and friend Adrienne, Dr. Adrienne Rigueur. She's an emergency department physician, and she has been taking care of patients for more than a decade. And now we are talking about this year, which is entirely different, the COVID pandemic. And she's helping us to understand what it's like from her perspective. She's giving us some raw details, some of the granular reality that she's looking at from day to day that we don't really hear about. Dr. Rigueur, you were telling us that you notice your patients when they start to exert themselves, that you see their pulse ox dropping, and that's when I think I get involved as a neurologist, because many times patients come into the hospital because they've passed out or because they're dizzy. And so it sounds like what you're saying is that's how that happens.
Yeah, we see that a lot. People get short of breath, then they start hyperventilating, and then the next thing you know, they're out. And then the family's like, oh my God, what just happened? Or they're like, the room's spinning, I'm so dizzy. And then we check, the first thing we do is check a set of vitals, and we're like, well, oxygen's important and yours is pretty low. So perhaps that's what's going on.
Wow, wow. So for the big question, Dr. Rigueur, you know, we've had this message challenge really for the entire time of the pandemic. I mean, particularly in America, where we're all about our independence and our freedom. And all of a sudden we have this crisis, this worldwide crisis, and we're telling people, okay, you have your independence, put this mask on, get away from people, physically distance yourself from other people, don't go here, don't go there. We've had a message challenge, and we still have it. Do you think anybody's listening anymore, and do you think they care?
I'm not sure. It's very disheartening in the ER to hear stories of, we had a family dinner of 22 people for Thanksgiving. And then they come and say, now I'm coughing and short of breath. What do you think it is? And not to be rude, but what do you think it is? We've begged people, we've asked people, and I don't know what way to say, don't do it. Do it for your neighbor. Do it for the 85-year-old across the street. Do it for your healthcare workers. We are getting burnt. We're tired, and not tired because we don't want to do the job. Taking care of COVID patients is very taxing. Taxing on the body, taxing on the brain, taxing on the emotion. We don't like giving someone a phone to say, I have to put your husband on a ventilator. I think you need to talk to him now. Because in my head, I'm saying, you may never talk to him again. And a lot of times that goes right over the patient's head. The wife on the phone and the husband's in front of me, and she's like, oh, well, you really think I need to talk to him on the phone? And I'm like, yeah, because you're going to have some tough decisions in the next 3 days to 2 weeks about what's going on. And you need to talk to him and let him know you love him, but let him know that you need to know what his wishes are. And that's not fun.
Right.
That's emotionally taxing. Not to mention, it's not like putting someone on a breathing machine and then you just walk away. A lot of times, once you do that, there are lots of medications people need once they're on the breathing machine. So the nurses are going in and out the room. Every time you go out the room, you have to take off all that gown, gloves, gear, Go get the medication that's needed, then re-put back on a new set of gowns, gloves, and gear. We're wasting supplies, not because we want to waste them, but because these are the things that have to happen to take care of a COVID patient. So is it falling on deaf ears? Sometimes it feels that way, but I ask people all the time. The other day when I heard about the Thanksgiving dinner, how can I tell you that this is something you need to do for all of us and you'll listen? And I haven't come up with that answer yet.
Right.
I'm still working on it. I'm trying to be bold and just to the point.
Sure.
We are so deep in it right now. It's everywhere. And it's not like your friend or your family member doesn't have it so they can come on over. They have it. And if they don't have it, they have the potential to have been exposed to it.
Sure.
So keep your bubbles. Keep the people you've been with in your own home and stay home if you can. If you need to go out, wear a mask.
Right.
I always think about how for 9/11, we lost a significant number of Americans during that event. And we all came together. We all tried to do the right thing. And when they asked us to take off our shoes at the airport, we all did it.
Yes.
It wasn't all this, oh, I want my rights. I don't want to take off my shoes. We said, okay, we're going to take off our shoes. I think we need to regroup and get that attitude again because we need to wear a mask.
Yes. Okay, I'm getting your point. Yes, my attitude is getting adjusted right in front of you. You know, you also reminded me of where we've been with all of this. I mean, when we started in the spring, we, of course, had to have a learning curve, and we were all really frightened and freaked out. And so we shut down everything. We really did shut down everything. Even in the hospitals, we did. We stopped elective surgeries and procedures because we wanted to preserve those ventilators. But now we have the same numbers that we had in the spring, but we haven't shut down hospitals. And so now we have everybody who usually comes to the emergency department, plus these numbers with COVID that are just as high as they were in the spring. So it's really kind of a challenge these days. And part of it is, a big part of it is preventable and manageable, as you're saying.
Yeah, so in the spring, it was really, really, really scary because I was actually 6 months pregnant when this started.
Wow.
So being pregnant, being on the front lines and knowing nothing about COVID, we had no idea what to do. The knowledge that we gain now is very helpful.
Yes.
And I don't think we need to ask everyone to shut down completely like we did then. But we still have to do it in a way, do things in our lives in a way that makes sense. We have to listen to our public health experts. We have to social distance. Social distance doesn't mean I can't talk to you on the phone. We could have a happy hour over Zoom. It just means that we have to think. Think about our fellow man. Think about what we're doing and how this could expose not just me, but 10 people in my path from there forward.
Sure.
So, no, I don't think we should shut down the whole country again. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's realistic that it will happen. But we may have to do small little shutdowns, small little changes like closing restaurants early, closing indoor dining, but still having curbside, outdoor, things like that. But definitely, because we've learned so much more, that whole shut everything down attitude doesn't necessarily have to happen. We can use a little more fine-tuned ways to protect everyone.
Yes, yes. You know, you're reminding me about what we do in our house. Every once in a while, we do take kind of a time out and we talk about what is it that we're doing right now? Is it keeping us safe? Are we doing as well as we can? Are we washing enough? Because sometimes we've gotten a little bit lax and we've let ourselves enjoy outdoors and enjoy a certain community over here, certain community over there. But I think a timeout sometimes is helpful to figure out what we can do more effectively. And it helps us to not feel like we're shutting down in our own home. How are you doing in your own home? You mentioned that you were pregnant, and I know you have a family. How are you managing at these times?
So my neighbors get a show every night because I literally come home from the hospital and strip in the garage, run directly upstairs to the shower, take a shower after every shift, and then I see my family. I live with a germaphobe, so they're pretty much in our bubble. My mom she lives 6 blocks away, and she's in a bubble with us. So basically, it helps. It gives you a little different perspective when you're not stuck in your own home. So we just go back and forth between her house and our house, our kids. But we stay in our bubble. We don't go. We get food delivery, and then we clean our groceries. We are really, really taking it seriously. And trust me, we have the same fatigue that everyone feels.
Right.
It is tiresome. Right. But every time I see that number of people dying a day, I say to myself, this is very little I can do to help my next door neighbor.
That's right.
To help the person down the street.
Right.
And it is what it is in terms of if you don't do it, you will see the consequences of it.
Right. Yeah, you're right. And one thing you bring up, you don't have the luxury of even asking so many questions. You're doing what we have to do because you're on the front lines. And I feel what you're saying. And even when I think about my own perspective, as a neurohospitalist, I cover several hospitals. There aren't that many of us. And I can't afford to not be at work and be healthy because it'll throw off the whole system. I literally don't know who would be covering me if I were not able to go to the hospital. And my wife works in the hospital also. So she's a hospitalist and she's on a schedule with a whole bunch of other people. And there's not that much flexibility, really, so there's not that much coverage. So we really have to go the extra distance to take care of ourselves, really. I want to thank you for everything that you're doing, Dr. Rigueur, in our community, taking care of us, really. It sounds sterile, but, really you're taking care of our community, taking care of people that have shortness of breath and people that have emergencies. At this time, you're shouldering a lot of this burden in ways that others don't have to. I think we can do a little more to be even supportive for you. And not only do I want to thank you, but the people that you work with, those that are in the emergency department, the actual frontline people that I stand behind, really, those that are paramedics, nurses, even the technicians that help get everything done. Thank you so much for what you do. I appreciate it. Yeah. And thanks for coming on the show and sharing your experience, really. We're not looking at what you're looking at. And I think sometimes because we don't have the vision that you have, that it's easy to say, is something really going on in there and how bad is it? So thank you for sharing the raw reality as you're seeing it and sharing it so that we can have our own attitude adjustment. And for you in the Winner's Circle, thank you for joining. Thank you for watching. And I hope that you learned. And I hope that you can appreciate also that we can take care of our lives as well as take care of our livelihood. We really can do it if we just stay vigilant on what we need to do to get through these difficult times. We can get through more of it together as a society so that at the end of it, we can be there to celebrate the victory. Until then, guys, keep winning. I'll see you right here next week. Take care.